Take a step back for a moment and really process what is happening in Indianapolis right now. Because if you blink, you are going to miss one of the most remarkable financial transformations in the history of professional women's sports. We are not talking about modest growth. We are not talking about incremental improvement. We are talking about a franchise that has gone from a $90 million valuation in 2024 to a staggering $560 million valuation heading into the 2026 season. That is more than a 500% increase. That is not a business trend. That is a seismic shift. And the name at the center of all of it is one that has become impossible to ignore, impossible to avoid, and apparently impossible to quantify. Because every time someone puts a number on what Caitlin Clark means to the Indiana Fever, a newer, larger number comes along and makes the previous one look conservative. Let that sink in for a second. $560 million. In 2024, the Indiana Fever were valued at $90 million. That was not a bad number. That was a respectable number for a franchise in a league that has been fighting for mainstream recognition for nearly 3 decades. But $90 million and $560 million are not in the same conversation. They are not even in the same building. And the distance between those two numbers represents something that the entire sports world needs to stop and acknowledge, because we are witnessing something that does not happen often in professional sports, and it is happening right now, right in front of us, in real time. Now let us be completely honest about something before we go any further, because honesty is what this conversation demands. The Indiana Fever, for all their financial success, are not a perfect operation right now. There are real questions on the court that need to be addressed, and we cannot let the business success overshadow the basketball reality. Stephanie White came into this head coaching role carrying a reputation as a defensive specialist. She was supposed to be the architect of a structured, disciplined, defensively dominant system. That was the pitch. That was the selling point. And yet, sitting here watching preseason play bleed into regular season preparation, the defense has been a consistent struggle. The rebounding in particular has been alarming. For a coach who is supposed to be a defensive guru, the results on that end of the floor have not matched the reputation, and that is a conversation that cannot be avoided forever. But here is what Stephanie White has done that deserves credit. Even if the circumstances forced her hand, she is getting the basketball into Caitlin Clark's hands more consistently. Now, whether that is a pure coaching philosophy or a pragmatic response to what is working, the outcome is the same. The offense functions better when Clark is operating with the ball. The team creates better looks, generates more efficient possessions, and produces moments that make the game compelling to watch when their star is actively involved in the flow. Whether White arrived at that conclusion on her own or whether the results simply demanded it does not change the fact that it is happening and it is the right adjustment. But let us zoom back out to the numbers, because the numbers are what tell the real story of where this franchise stands right now. The Indiana Fever have gone from 6th in franchise valuation in 2024 to 3rd in both 2025 and 2026. They sit behind only the Valkyries and the Liberty. Their revenue for the season came in at $52 million, which placed them 2nd in the entire league. Merchandise sales climbed by 60%. That is not a rounding error. That is not a fluctuation. That is a direct response to consumer demand that was created, sustained, and amplified by one player's presence on the roster. Clark drove that merchandise surge. She drove the sponsorship conversations. She drove the television negotiations. She drove the arena decisions. And she drove the investment in infrastructure that is now reshaping the physical landscape of Fever basketball. Let us talk about that infrastructure investment, because this is where the story gets even more interesting. The Indiana Fever are building a brand new $78 million practice facility that is scheduled to open in 2027. $78 million. For a team that was valued at $90 million just 2 years ago, that number represents a level of financial commitment that would have been unthinkable before Clark's arrival. And this is not a basic facility. This is not a modest upgrade to aging equipment. The photos that have been released show something that is genuinely state-of-the-art, from top to bottom, through every corner of the building. And yes, there is a golf simulator built into the design, which tells you everything you need to know about who this facility was designed to attract and retain. Nobody is building a $78 million practice facility with a golf simulator because they are planning to let their franchise cornerstone walk. This facility is a message. It is a commitment written in concrete and steel. The Indiana Fever are telling Caitlin Clark, loudly and without ambiguity, that Indianapolis is where she belongs, that they are investing in her comfort, her development, and her future, and that they are willing to back that message up with tens of millions of dollars. That is not a rumor. That is not speculation. That is a $78 million statement of intent. Now add to that the fact that the Indiana Fever secured the 2025 WNBA All-Star Game. You do not get handed a marquee event like that unless the league recognizes that your franchise is the story. The All-Star Game is a celebration of the sport, but it is also a business decision. It goes where the cameras will follow, where the fans will travel, and where the interest is highest. The Fever earned that designation because they have become the gravitational center of the WNBA's cultural moment. And then there is the television situation, which might be the most remarkable piece of all of this. The Indiana Fever are the only team in the entire WNBA with all 44 of their games nationally televised this season. Every single game. Not most of them, not the marquee matchups. All 44. That level of broadcast saturation is unprecedented for a WNBA franchise, and it sends a message to every sponsor, every potential partner, every casual fan who might flip channels and stumble upon a game that the Fever are the product the league is centering its mainstream push around. You do not get 44 nationally televised games unless networks believe that people will watch. And people will watch because Caitlin Clark is on the floor. Beyond the television coverage, the Fever will play 39 of their 44 games in NBA-sized arenas. Think about what that means logistically and commercially. NBA arenas hold anywhere from 18,000 to 21,000 people. That is a massive seating footprint compared to the venues that much of the WNBA has traditionally operated in. Playing 39 games in those buildings represents a colossal bet on sustained ticket demand. It is a confident declaration that the Fever can fill those seats, or at least fill enough of them to justify the upgrade in venue scale. But that confidence also carries risk, and it would be dishonest not to acknowledge it. Here is the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath all of this financial celebration. If those NBA arenas do not consistently sell out, or even come close to selling out, the optics flip quickly. A half-filled 20,000-seat arena does not look like success. It looks like overreach. It looks like ambition outrunning reality. And in professional sports, perception shapes narrative faster than almost anything else. The hope is that Clark's consistent presence and healthy availability will drive the kind of attendance numbers that justify 39 NBA-sized venues, but that outcome is not guaranteed, and it is something worth watching closely as the season unfolds. Which brings us directly to the issue of engagement beyond the star. There has been a genuine and measurable cooling in broader WNBA content engagement since the initial explosion that followed Clark's arrival. Creators who pivoted heavily into covering the league during that first wave of intense interest are now reporting significant drops in viewership. One creator with over 80 million total channel views shared that their numbers have declined by roughly 80% since the start of 2025. Videos that once performed at high levels are now struggling to reach 10,000 views. That is not a small correction. That is a dramatic pullback, and it points to something real happening in the audience ecosystem around women's basketball content. Now, it would be too simplistic to say the WNBA has lost its moment, because that is not accurate either. What appears to be happening is a separation between two distinct things: Caitlin Clark as an individual draw and the WNBA as a league-wide entertainment product. Clark remains compelling. She generates attention. She creates highlights. She fills arenas in a way that no other player in the league currently does. But the broader league product has struggled to hold the casual fans who came through the door because of Clark. If a viewer tunes in during a week when Clark is not on the schedule or watches a game that lacks competitive drama, that viewer may not return. That is the challenge the league faces, and it is a challenge that cannot be solved by one player no matter how extraordinary that player is. Watching some of the early game footage from this season, including the preseason matchup against the Nigerian national team, there were stretches that were simply difficult to watch. The competitiveness and polish that attract mainstream sports fans were not always present. And coming from an audience that regularly consumes NBA and NFL basketball and football, the difference in overall quality is noticeable. That is not an attack on the league. That is just an honest description of where the product currently stands for viewers with high benchmarks set by other sports. The point is this: Caitlin Clark has handed the WNBA an enormous gift. She has delivered casual fans, mainstream media coverage, television contracts, and commercial investment at a scale the league has never experienced. But gifts can only open doors. Sustaining what comes through those doors requires a better product across the board, and that is still a work in progress. Now let us address Clark's personal performance, because her on-court story is just as important as the business narrative surrounding her. Last season was difficult. Clark played just 13 games, a series of muscle-related injuries, including groin strains that kept her sidelined for extended stretches, derailed what should have been a breakout sophomore campaign. An ankle injury sustained during rehab added to the setbacks, and eventually the fever made the decision to shut her down for the remainder of the season. It was a frustrating year, both for Clark personally and for a franchise that needed her on the floor. But here is what makes the valuation story even more remarkable. Even with Clark playing just 13 games last season, the Fever's franchise value nearly doubled from $335 million to $560 million. Even with limited on-court availability, the brand equity built around her presence was strong enough to continue appreciating. Think about what happens if she plays a full, healthy season. Think about what 44 nationally televised games with a healthy, active, producing Caitlin Clark does to merchandise sales, television ratings, attendance figures, and ultimately franchise valuation. The ceiling on this growth story has not been reached yet, not even close. And heading into 2026, the early indicators are encouraging. Clark is healthy. She is on the floor. She is productive. She is handling the ball more frequently under Stephanie White's evolving system, and the results are visible. The offense is more dynamic when she is orchestrating it. The pace improves, the shot creation improves, the overall energy of the team shifts. That said, the coaching questions remain legitimate. Stephanie White cannot rest on the offense forever. The defensive identity that she was hired to build needs to emerge and become consistent. Rebounding cannot continue to be an Achilles heel for a franchise with this much talent and financial investment behind it. The 2026 season will be a defining one, not just for Clark, but for White as well. And the patience of ownership will only stretch so far if the on-court product does not begin reflecting the enormous resources being poured into this franchise. Because here's the thing about franchise valuations: they go up when belief in the future is strong. They come back down when results fail to match expectations. The Fever are sitting at $560 million because the market believes in the trajectory of this franchise. But that belief is not unconditional. It requires performance to sustain it. It requires wins. It requires compelling basketball. It requires the product on the floor to justify the premium placed on the brand. Clark is the engine of all of this. She has been the engine since day one. The franchise's entire financial transformation can be traced directly to her arrival. The valuation explosion, the merchandise spike, the television deals, the All-Star Game hosting rights, the $78 million practice facility, the NBA arena scheduling, the second-place revenue finish at $52 million, and the league-wide recognition as a top-3 franchise in terms of commercial power. All of it flows from the same source, and that creates a dynamic that is fascinating to observe. The Indiana Fever have become one of the most valuable franchises in the WNBA, not through decades of sustained excellence or championship pedigree, but through the arrival of one transformational player. That is extraordinary. It is also a reminder of how fragile momentum can be in professional sports. One injury, one prolonged losing streak, one dramatic shift in the broader entertainment landscape can change the trajectory faster than anyone expects. The NBA-sized arenas will test how far the demand actually extends. The national television coverage will expose both the brilliance and the flaws of this team in real time. The coaching questions will face scrutiny every single night, and Clark herself will carry the weight of a franchise that has attached its entire commercial identity to her shoulders. But if history from the past 2 seasons is any guide, she has handled that weight with remarkable composure. She has not buckled under the pressure. She has not retreated from the spotlight. She has played, competed, endorsed, engaged, and delivered in a way that has fundamentally altered the business of women's basketball in Indiana and arguably beyond. The numbers do not lie. A 500% valuation increase is not hype. It is math. A 60% merchandise surge is not coincidence. It is consumer behavior responding to a genuine star. A $78 million practice facility is not an accident. It is a strategic commitment to a player who has earned every dollar of investment surrounding her. The Indiana Fever are a different franchise than they were in 2024. They are a different franchise than they were in 2025. They are richer, more visible, more commercially powerful, and more nationally relevant than at any point in their history. And they know, ownership knows, the front office knows, the coaching staff knows that the single most important thing they can do to protect and grow everything they have built is to keep Caitlin Clark healthy, happy, and in Indianapolis for as long as possible. The $78 million practice facility with the golf simulator is their loudest answer to the question of whether they understand that reality. They understand it completely. Now the task is to build a team, a culture, a coaching system, and a fan experience around that reality that is worthy of the moment they find themselves in, because the moment is real, the growth is real, the numbers are real, and the opportunity sitting in front of the Indiana Fever right now is unlike anything this franchise has ever had before. Whether they maximize it is the question that the entire 2026 season will begin to answer. And with all 44 games on national television, the whole country will be watching every step of the journey.